So thank you to the Lord Mayor for sharing a few points with us there from the Blue Zone. A quick recap on this morning's highly anticipated speech from the Chancellor. Clearly, 450 financial firms committing to align with the climate goals and the Paris Agreement. That is capturing all the headlines today. But let's not overlook the new requirement for UK financial institutions and listed companies to publish net zero transition plans that will detail how they will transition. That's an absolute world first, and it's an important step to make sure that the commitments made today at Glasgow turn into all-important plans. And finally, setting the context for our panel discussion here at the Sir Roger Gifford studio, a series of initiatives have been announced to address barriers to finance that are faced by developing countries. And the Chancellor said they totaled 576 million. We've heard on this platform, we're hearing it from the Blue Zone this morning, a lot of calls for the need for public finance to be leveraged so that we can crowd in this unprecedented wall of private commercial finance. And here to discuss that with me in more detail, two fantastic panelists who actually have direct experience of doing this. I've got Jules Kortenhorst, CEO of the Rocky Mountain Institute. Welcome, Jules. And Sebastian Kind, all the way from Buenos Aires, the CEO of Green Map. So without further ado, we've only got half an hour, and I'm sure there's a lot that we want to impart to the audience. One way of crowding in private capital by using public capital is through guarantee mechanisms that can take many different forms. And I thought I would start with you, Jules, by asking for your insights on how we can make those types of structures work.
Thank you, Rhian Mari, and let me start by reminding all of us, we are facing a planetary emergency. That planetary emergency is going to have massive impacts in developing economies and emerging markets. And there is a commitment already back to Copenhagen to help those countries mobilize the capital so that they can be part of this transition. And so far we've not done enough. We've not done enough partly in quantum, but partly because of these structuring challenges, and that gets to the issue of guarantees, right? Governments and multilateral financial institutions have been looking to support developing countries, but they've been often doing it by taking the full quantum of deals onto their balance sheets, as opposed to much more precisely defining where they have a critical role to play. And that critical role now no longer deals with technology risk. When you talk about solar, talk about wind, talk about energy efficiency, electric mobility, these are proven technologies. The risks really revolve around country risk, policy risk, currency risk. And that is where multilateral financial institutions, governments can play a crucial role through guarantee structures to mobilize much more private capital that is comfortable with the project risk, comfortable with the technology risk, comfortable with the idea of financing the energy transition, but may not be comfortable with financing in countries, in regions in the world where normally they wouldn't feel comfortable with those risks of country policy and currency.
And of course, it's those countries, it's the developing and the emerging markets where we're going to see huge population growth over the next few years, huge requirements for energy. It needs to be clean energy for us to stay within our carbon budget. So the stakes are really high on us actually finding these types of solutions and actually turning the commitments of billions that we're hearing from the governments into trillions by actually making sure that private capital plays its part.
You're absolutely right. I mean, these countries are going to grow their economies. They are going to grow their energy needs. And just as much as the developed world has used energy to build their GDP per capita, countries in the global south will have to do the same thing. The good news is they can leapfrog over the fossil fuel technologies of the past straight into the low carbon technologies of the future. In order for them to do that, we have to provide them with the financing mechanisms so they can get access to those technologies.
We need to make sure that the cost of capital is comparable, if not cheaper, than the cost of capital for building fossil fuel equivalent. That's the challenge for us all.
That's the challenge.
That's
precisely.
the challenge for us all. Sebastian, coming to you, we've had fantastic conversations about some of the work that you've been leading in Argentina, and I'd be delighted for you to share. And please do go into some of the detail, because I do think on some of these conversations, we have knowledgeable financiers dialing into our platform, wondering, how do we do all this? How do you make it successful?
Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Rhian, for this invitation. I think that what Jules said before is very important, and that is perhaps the key in long-term infrastructure. So in order to bring long-term infrastructure projects and programs to emerging economies, what we have to understand is how to unlock those markets to the international capital market, because capital is pretty much everywhere. The point is how we can get into that, how we can bring the capital for the long-term view in countries that are used to deal with a lot of problems in the short term, not even in the mid or long term. So in order to really unlock the market, what we have to provide is innovation through finance and different kind of mechanisms to unlock this short-term view to the long run, in order to let those long-term infrastructure projects compete with others in the area, in the region in which they are. Otherwise, there's not going to be a real possibility to unlock that kind of capital and unlock that kind of possibilities to deploy renewables or infrastructure as we wish. In the case of Argentina, we have a very interesting experience. I was part of the government until a couple of years ago, and I took office in a country that was immersed in a profound energy crisis and in a profound economic crisis. If you really figure out what Argentina is today, it has more than half of the portfolio of the IMF, which is not minor, and immersed again in a really deep crisis. So how to bring capital to a so complex investment environment for the long run was what myself and my team had in mind at the very beginning. So we decided to tackle most of the risk associated with the long-term infrastructure deployment of a program. So we said that at that time that in order to do that, we need to shield the program out of the Argentinian risk, out of the country risk, and put it straight in international capital market by unlocking most of the things that are used to be locked. So basically, among different things and an interesting de-risking mechanism that we built a powerful package of warranties to backstop the obligations of the off-taker and the sovereign government to really catch the attention of the international capital market. So when you are in a procurement process, the more you can open the spectrum to the bidders, the more you diminish the prices. So you put the prices down, you open the competition, you really unlock the market for those that were not able to go to this market due to the complexity of the political and the environment itself. So it was very interesting. The result is that in a couple of years, a little bit more than 2 years, we were able to bring more than $7 billion into the economy for roughly 5 gigawatts of new, mainly wind and solar. Last month, the country picked power in the wholesale market with almost 30% from zero, average almost 15%. We're talking about a country also that has a lot of difficult things around not only the economy and the energy, but also social problems. A country that also has the 4th shale oil reserve and 2nd shale gas reserve in the world, with a very strong oil and gas sector, bringing renewables from zero, from scratch. A country that was not able to structure long-term for decades. And we did it by bringing this kind of innovation, so it was really, really good. We are very proud and happy.
And we're very very happy to be championing that on our platform this morning, because these are the sort of success stories that we do need to amplify and we need to hear about. That's fantastic. May I ask one technical question though, and the point about the warranties you said about the offtake, who provided that? Was that the Argentinian government? Was that the DFIs? Was that another party?
No, we structured the warranties with three different steps, with three different stages. The first one was a liquidity warranty, the energy payment warranty, that was funded in the government of Argentina at that time by the Treasury. It's more on the commitment side rather than just cash, because there's a commitment for a revolving energy warranty that we are using, we're still using. We designed it for supporting the off-taker commitment. There's a second one, warranty that was structured with Treasury notes, so it's a sovereign warranty in order to jump from the off-taker risk to the country risk. And there's a third one to backstop the obligation of the sovereign government in order to catch the attention of the international players to bring their capital to Argentina. So more on that side rather than on the locals. We decided to provide this, and this was done through the World Bank, a World Bank warranty. We brought the World Bank to sign a very interesting commitment to support, to backstop the obligation of the sovereign warranty, that at the same time backstop the first one, that at the same time backstop the original commitment. So it's a waterfall of warranties. The interesting thing, financially speaking, is that the leverage was 10 times the commitment towards the real capital that was deployed in the country. That number is really perhaps the most interesting to mention, in the sense that the availability of public finance towards the private should be structured through a proper mechanism to really lever this, make this leverage as much as we can, to attract as much as we can capital in the most complex environments.
And the point about the leverage is absolutely key. We've been hearing that all day yesterday, so many speakers. It's great to hear that the World Bank played such a role, because we heard it from Larry Fink when he was here yesterday, saying about we might need to rethink, or we really need to reimagine the roles of the big multilateral development banks, and maybe even rethink their charters. And Catherine Stodolka on our platform this morning, sharing some of their research they've done at Systemic, showing that some of the multilateral organizations, despite the great work that they do, are not crowding in more than $1 for every dollar that they use. And this is just a missed opportunity. We have 130 trillion of total assets committing to net zero over in the blue zone this morning, and that is a wall of capital that we need to find ways of channeling towards projects such as yours. And Jules, I know Rocky Mountain Institute got lots of examples of where you've been working, I think, for example, in the Caribbean and worldwide, that you've been looking at similar types of structures.
Yes, we have. And the interesting thing is, of course, that what you have structured in Argentina is really brilliant and quite unique. We can't go through that complex structuring process over and over again on a country-by-country basis. We need to get to standardized products, particularly indeed in the Caribbean, where on the whole the size of markets are limited, therefore projects are smaller, and you can't necessarily create every time a completely new structure. So what I would love to see is standardized models, standardized contracting structures, where financial institutions and multilateral banks know, okay, this is a 10 megawatt solar project. We take off the shelf the way we do this, and this is just how it gets done. That would dramatically increase the speed at which projects can get done. It would flow capital much faster, and it would make life easier for the governments in these small island states that don't necessarily have the capacity that you had access to in Argentina to get deals done much faster. So how do we build this now into a number of standardized mechanisms that can be replicated all around the world at very quick pace?
And it might be an unfair question, but why haven't we done that before? What have been the barriers? I mean, you know, when you look at project finance or leverage finance, which was my background, standard documentation and standard terms were, you know, you'd negotiate everything. Obviously, it's the nature of a transaction, but those things had already been worked on.
I would think that one factor probably is that the international financial institutions have a way of doing things that puts, in the end, large deals on their balance sheet, and the incentive structures in those institutions revolve around getting those deals done. These are new structures. They will take a bit more time in the beginning. They are not the easiest thing to pull together, and nobody knows whether the year-end bonus will deliver on the basis of that deal. So we're going to have conversations with the leadership of these international financial institutions and say, you have to reorient your organizations and your teams and your deal-making skills from lending to guarantee structures.
Absolutely.
And then we can bring the wall of capital from the private sector along.
It's a mindset shift. The good news is Maktar Diop was here yesterday from the managing director of the IFC, and he also made the call for the need for more standardization, he wanted also standard legal documents and also standard measurement metrics. So it sounds like we're all converging on similar solutions. Maybe we need to take that one offline and figure out how we can make it happen, Jules.
Well, I think that is one of the wonderful things of this COP. I have been to a few of these over the course of the last 15 years. And on the whole, these negotiations have been between governments and about plans and commitments. What I'm seeing here this week is that the role of the private sector, the role of financial institutions that are not government-owned, is much more prominent. And the instinct of those organizations and those leaders is, okay, we need to do this, let's get on with it. Let's start to talk about implementation. And then you get to these very practical things like standard documentation, project preparation facilities, volume of transactions, momentum. So I think that in a couple of years, when we look back at COP26, people will say this was the moment that the troops arrived from the private sector and that they brought a focus on implementation and action that we hadn't seen before.
What we heard the Lord Mayor say earlier, this is the finance COP, and hopefully that will be the legacy of this COP. And it's true, the chief executives, the chairs of some of the largest financial institutions in the world are here en masse. In a way, I've been to a few COPs, I'm sure you've been to far more. I've never seen this before. It does feel very, very different.
And we saw this morning in the Blue Zone regulators speaking about the pressures they are putting on those financial institutions. They are here because they know that their regulators are wanting them to do that. But they're also here because they understand that there is a massive opportunity to deploy this capital.
Absolutely, yeah.
And Sebastian, your success with your structured warranty product in Argentina, what's next for you? What are you working on now and what's the future hold?
Yeah, interesting. I think that the smartest way to do it is what Jules said before. Instead of just deploy capital in a straight way, the effect of bringing solutions like warranties and different kind of instruments will promote X times the amount of capital as we need for tackling climate change. So we decided to jump, instead of going to as an advisor to other market, we decided to jump into an international hub. So we created GreenMap. GreenMap is a non-profit institution based in Brussels. GreenMap is funded independently to support governments at no cost for structuring their procurement processes in renewable energy in the most efficient way. So we are developing two different products. One is being launched tomorrow here at COP, which is the iTrust. The iTrust is a mechanism that is inspired in the warranty package that we developed in Argentina, with two different products within the same package. One is a revolving energy warranty, and the other is the early termination payment warranty, similar to what I said before. So the idea is to offer this as one of the solutions we have to different governments to implement, to backstop their obligations, to really promote renewables in the smart way. The second is a platform that we are building, a product that we are building to support governments to streamline their procurement processes in renewable energy from, end to end, from the data gathering through modeling, through e-tendering processes, through monitoring, through the whole life cycle of the procurement process. Basically, we are offering what I would have loved to have at the time I was in government, and I hadn't. So we decided, I brought my team from the government, the same team with whom I developed the whole thing, to GridMap, to start this venture last year, to support governments at no cost for benefiting themselves of the same thing.
I can't tell you how much I like what you just said. The idea that, I mean, I keep being told you can't solve this through projects, it has to be through policy, and I think we all agree on that. But I think for the policy to be informed by people who are trying to do the projects on the ground, that is the way of making sure that we have the best sort of enabling environment for us to succeed and crowd in this capital.
You're absolutely right. I mean, Rhian, we suffer about what we are talking about. So with the hands on the thing, we had that experience in the Global South. So the idea is to support others to really tackle the problems we already had. And you know, when you put Europe, the States, Japan, Australia, some countries, developed countries, outside of the discussion because they are developed, the capital is there, there's no really political risk, there's no really the same kind of risk that the Global South suffers. Pretty much the rest of the world, which is our house, suffers about the same things. So trying to replicate this, to support others doing the same or similar things. Of course, nothing has to be replicated in the same way because each country, each government, each market is different, but we are talking about similar things pretty much everywhere. So the idea is to support others in the same way.
Yeah, if we crack the code on some of this, how do we make sure we export that knowledge? How do we collaborate? One of our key themes has been about radical collaboration. I'm going to take advantage of being the moderator here to say about one of the projects that we're working on at the Green Finance Institute with my colleague Jeremy Gorelick, who sits in Cape Town, because I do think it's important that you work on these things on the ground with local actors who really, really understand market conditions. And we've been working on a credit enhancement guarantee fund that will provide a 50% guarantee to the underwriting banks so that they can underwrite climate smart infrastructure transactions in South Africa and then distribute that paper to local domestic pension funds. And we heard from Baroness Shriti Vadera this morning saying the importance of actually trying to deepen the green financial markets in country. And the thing that's so interesting about this particular story, we've been structuring this guarantee for the past few months. We get to 9 times leverage on our models for the concessionary capital that we would need from government or philanthropy.
That's different.
Yeah, there we go. But we've uncovered $1.5 billion worth of climate smart infrastructure projects, shovel ready, that the banks would like to underwrite, but are struggling because of the dynamics and the cost of capital and the need for a credit enhancement facility. So clearly those that have been investing in technical capacity building in South Africa have done a fantastic job, and we're hearing a lot about South Africa here at this COP. We'll hear a lot more next year because COP actually moving to Egypt will have an African flavour next year. But actually that mindset shift so that we can get government money, so we can get the multilateral banks to start using their capital as risk capital to catalyse other transactions. I feel we've still got a bit of a way to go on that.
We do, because the energy transition is a complex subject, right? And the pace at which things are changing is enormous. So keeping track of the latest data, the latest insights, the latest information is hard. People hardly realize that all around the world now, renewables, wind and solar, are the most cost-effective form of power generation. In fact, in many places, they are so cost-effective that you can close down existing coal plants and replace them with wind and solar. That is precisely the bold commitment that South Africa announced earlier this week. We're going to see that happen all around the world, is our view. But in order to structure those transactions, we once again need to create standardized products that allow us to take these coal plants off the balance sheets of utilities, whether they're government owned or privately held, take those coal plants off the balance sheets of the utilities, put them off to the side as stranded assets, make sure that we deal with the capital cost associated with that stranded asset, but then deploy new capital that provides the electricity through wind, solar, and battery storage. In many places around the world, that deal can now be structured and be profitable. That deal can be done such that rates, electricity rates, go down, not up. It's all a matter of structuring. And of course, the opportunity for finance to be part of that deal flow is magnificent.
And as you're speaking, just a thought, to make those economics work, do you also think that we would need to be compensating developing countries for keeping their fossil fuel reserves in the ground? Because that actually changes the dynamics of those calculations quite dramatically.
I think that's a very valid point. I don't think that the community here has yet had that very complicated conversation, because that is an additional burden indeed on those transactions. But it is interesting that a country like South Africa, that still has abundant coal reserves, is now willing to engage in that conversation of coal retirement, replacement with renewables, without getting compensated. And it is, of course, true that the wind in South Africa and the abundant sunshine in South Africa comes for free. So in that sense, the opportunity cost of leaving coal in the ground is not as painful when Mother Earth benefits from wind and sun.
Thank you so much. I'm conscious that you both have appointments that you need to keep, so I need to keep us to time, which is a shame because I'd love to keep this conversation going. Thank you both so much for joining us here today, and thank you for the great work that you're both doing. We look forward to working with you in future. Thanks very much to Jules and Sebastian.
Thank you.